Hello, and welcome to Varn Blog. I want to talk about thought terminating cliches or thought terminating phrases that I hear all the time now, specifically. But I'm going to actually forewarn this with like using logical fallacies to try to disprove any argument because the fallacies are being used vulgarly. Like anytime you attack someone's character, it's called an ad hominem, even if that attackman character is relevant to what they say. Um, this also can be misused. I mean, thought terminating cliches is used by skeptics and pundits to basically derail conversation, which can be itself a thought terminating cliche. But there are phrases that I've been kind of rallying against because they actually do affect the way people think and they're materially rewarded. One of them that I hear from both, mostly from left liberals, but also sometimes from conservatives, is hypocrisy is the point. Now, here's the thing. Decayed ideologies, and I'm going to get, I'll defend the use of decadence. People are like, oh, why do you use decadence? It has such a weird moral framework. I'm like, I use decadence because the life cycle of something that had a purpose continues to exist, but lose coherence and cohesion, and thus can be said to be, as a metaphor, decayed. And like decay, it can cause new things to come up. Degenerated political programs and degenerated academic research programs can actually launch whole new fields as they degenerate, and often do. But that doesn't mean that the systems, whether they be, and a system itself can be a thought terminating cliche, but systems, whether they be aggregates or collectives with agency or collectives in the imagination, don't have effects that are far downstream of this. So hypocrisy being the point is fascinating because there's such an identification of people with their political leaders that when they look at other people's political leaders, they go, oh, hypocrisy is the point. Even, when they turn on themselves, people always predict that the other side is more cohesive than they are. Like I hear the right wingers are cohesive and left wingers, by that they mostly mean left liberals, are not. It's not true. The right has been at war with itself in various factions as long as I've been alive. The Reagan fusionism and Trump fusionism were demagogic figures who papered over the problems with their personality. I think maybe you can say that liberal centrists just don't have the personality to do that. Then most of them come up in academic and bureaucratic milieus that do not encourage a personality traits that can paper over differences. But that doesn't mean that any of these are coherent political projects. Now, a lot of people will say, well, then why do you focus on coherence? Coherence is actually never complete art. There's no ideology that's going to actually be a complete, neat box in which everything's going to fit in. And I think we just kind of have to deal with that. But as both a way to analyze things as they exist, descriptions, and deal with things as we'd like them to be norms, everyone has an ideology. There's no such thing as a non-ideological take. In fact, the people who claim not to have an ideology tend to be the most ideological because it is hard to see. So what's the problem with the hypocrisy is the point? Thing is, hypocrisy is the point on a structural level for almost every faction and every side. I point this out all the time. The cops work because they have a monopoly on force, which means they can use things that anyone else is illegal. That's their sovereignty, effectively, or their sovereignty imparted to them by the state is that the establishment of a monopoly on force is how they operate, right? And yes, they protect property. Property was often stolen. But who or what counts as stealing is who or what counts as being subject to the law. It works by exceptions. I mean, while I've been rallying against rehabilitation of Carl Smith, this stuff isn't wrong. It is the logic of states. And it didn't even take Carl Smith to see it. The thing is, you could see it in different thinkers, such as it's implied in Machiavelli, who was not nearly as elitist or exclusionary as Smith. It's implied in a lot of social Republican thinkers that you do need an external force to rally against. and the exception defines the rule, even if you are trying to enfranchise massive amounts of people. The problem with that from a leftist standpoint is that sovereignty implies that you are coming from a place of already established power and that the current situation favors you, and it doesn't. But hypocrisy being the point is a problem in a couple ways, because you can throw it at any ideology. Think about it in this way. Both Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Marjorie Taylor Greene both will side with their party on major voting issues and vote generally fairly in allegiance with the center of their party, and yet also talk about how, the people are failing the common man. That tactic's as old as time. You will also notice that both parties do more radical things legislatively when they do not have the executive, and they tend to take the lead from the executive when their party does have the executive. That doesn't happen in other countries because other parliamentary systems don't separate it that way. So when you look at that, you see that there are all kinds of incentives to even believe at the time that you're pushing for radical reforms. And then when you're actually empowered to hold your coalition together, it is game theoretically sound to not do that. That is hypocrisy, but it is also structurally incentivized. And yes, there are things that could mitigate against it, kind of, like more mass enfranchisement, recall, etc., non-first past the post voting. But it doesn't remove it, particularly once you get into actually legislating, which is why a lot of reforms mediate the worst of the electoral systems. But when you meet liberals like, oh, if we just adapted ranked choice voting, things would get a lot better. Just like when they say mandatory voting would stop a lot of partisanship, that's just not true. The primary system, which was evolved to make the system more democratically responsive, is not actually all that democratic. It favors low participation voters opting out of candidacy and them not being considered in ways that, believe it or not, the people in the smoke-filled back rooms actually did consider. Hypocrisy is both useful to point out in others, but frankly, it's always the point. Both Marjorie Taylor Greene and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez probably believe what they say. I mean, you might say they don't from their actions, but they can believe it in the moment. Doesn't mean that they're not a control opposition within their own party, and that their populist pushings are often just as fake. Look at Elon Musk try to save Tesla's stock share by pretending to break with Trump and really oppositely fighting him. He's still giving tons of money to Republicans, and he's probably even still giving money to Democrats somewhere. Power is not about that. But there's all kinds of other ironies. I mean, and hypocrisies. The people defending Harvard as a bastion of equality when it's literally the most elite sorter in the country is fascinating to me. Right? I think Trump coming down on Harvard's research program is dangerous for science and whatnot. But I find it weird that leftists argue that endowments of ultra-rich institutions that literally favor the ultra-wealthy, even when they help minorities who are usually even wealthier than their white counterparts in those institutions, proof of the systemic racism that they talk about but don't really deal with, that somehow that's a push for mass equality. Universities sort people and allow people to move up and down by social class, and social mobility has become far more rigid. Don't give me that academic DEI programs actually mattered, nor have people who fight the woke agenda understood corporate DEI, what corporate DEI is about, which is expanding and contracting market share so that there's new customers. And yes, they are going to become woke and anti-woke. And ironically, when you hurt businesses for that, you're going to hurt ones that more cater to your values. An anti-DEI protest doesn't affect Walmart or Home Depot. You turning on Target, however, which branded itself as being liberal for not maintaining its DEI policies in light of Trump, that's going to hurt them. It's like who you cancel. You can only cancel people who are relatively close to you. And yet people say, oh, it's about group cohesion, but this isn't particularly group cohesive. Often it's self-undermining. So yes, conservatives are aware that when they are more profligate on spending than Democrats, but Democrats also tend to administer a austerity more competently. Then progressives will go and defend the Democrats for not being as incompetent about their cruelty as Republicans. And so it goes. And being the competent manager of a bad policy becomes a defense of the difference between the two things. So they're not all the same. And it's not just Republicans, it's vulgar thinking. It is vulgar thinking. But the vulgar thinking does get to the fact that there's a continuity of elite classes who are also in competition with each other. During the Biden administration, everyone focused on the PMC. It was a nice theodicy to explain why Bernie lost. But it also could let you believe that focusing on apparatchiks was really focusing on the system itself, because yes, the apparatchiks do have social clout compared to you, but pretending that they have more social clout than the owners of the Capitol itself was always absurd. Yet, there were a lot of leftists who did it, and a lot of rightists who picked it up. Is hypocrisy the point? Or are these contradictions imminent to the situation, which doesn't excuse them? Right? This is not Varn saying, oh, you should forgive these people. You absolutely shouldn't. My point is, it's not about the moral character in all areas. I had a friend, a left-wing-ish friend who comes out of conservative circles, who will tell me, like, why doesn't the left go after these corporate leaders like Josh Hawley? And I'm like, Josh Hawley voted for the big, beautiful bill and only tried to correct it in minor ways after he passed it. How is that different from what AOC tried to justify with the railroad strike in the Biden administration, which have seemingly all forgotten? It isn't. It's structurally almost identical as a political move, but you only see it when it's the other side. And unfortunately, even people who see it on their side forget it when the other side's in power. How many people who hated AOC a year ago got on the AOC train when Bernie and AOC were doing rallies, only to forget about it again now that hasn't amounted to much? I keep talking about the longue durée because a lot of you don't have the vision and also aren't willing to look at the deep, deep contradictions in your own thinking and who you support. People say, fascism is a merger of corporate power with state power, which it is, although corporate power, when Mussolini says that, he's not referring to limited liability corporations in the United States. In fact, corporatism was more about an integral state. But nonetheless, the class collaborationism between a lot of what's happening now and then in the authoritarianism is similar. Right? But you'll misunderstand the situation if you just think they're one-to-one. They're not. Is hypocrisy the point? And the reason why I say that is hypocrisy is the point, because collaboration between classes is what most social democrats want to. Even if they want to dispossess the bourgeoisie, they want the petite bourgeoisie and the working class to get along. et cetera, et cetera. And you go, oh, it's just social democrats. Oh yeah, what about China's new democracy? It argued the same thing, and that's for the building national cohesion so that you can have a worker state later. I mean, you'll see all these justifications. Is hypocrisy the point? Or are these deeply contradictory things that you have to work through? You just shouldn't accept them. But making it all about the moral hypocrisy of individual actors, even if they are hypocrites, misses the point. A lot of the professors in academia who do the sorting really do sincerely believe the bullshit that they say. It doesn't change their systemic place within the entire thing. It just doesn't. Is hypocrisy the point? I'm going to get on another one, which is nothing ever changes. This one really upsets me. I hear this all the time. And I hear it more when things are actually changing. People were more apocalyptic in the way they talked in the 1990s and early aughts than they are now. Now, the aughts is really things with things kept the headway. The brutality of the system became very obvious. But I'll post something about a blip in the dollar, for example, when the Fed governor is fired, and people think I'm saying the dollar's going to collapse overnight. I'm not. I'm going to put it in perspective. The tariff regime that we deal with now was actually not even Smoot-Hartley tariff regime, which actually comes from Congress. It was a tariff regime that was actually enacted to enable the administration to adjust tariffs quickly to reduce them. And you know who reduced the tariffs? And I know this will make a lot of my, quote, social democratic friends mad. It was FDR. FDR didn't remove all the tariffs. He just paired them to what other countries did. But unlike Trump, it was an actual parity, which lowered trade barriers for both sides. FDR wasn't a free trader either. He definitely wasn't a neoliberal. The first neoliberal that we might think of is probably JFK, which is another person that even young Zoomer leftists like to project whatever they want. It's easy to do that since he died so young into his presidency that he's basically a black box and all kinds of people project whatever. I got ratioed on Twitter once for saying that structurally the JFK was secretly an anti-imperialist and maybe even a communist is identical to the Bircher saying he was secretly an anti-globalist because he had slight reservations about the extent of what the CIA was doing, maybe. And I've seen all kinds of left-wing thinkers just degenerate into conspiracy theorists while also complaining about right-wing conspiracies. Some of the conspiracies are plausible, but like it doesn't explain that much. These are people who should know better. But nothing changes assumes that because the immediate cycle adjusts, that ripple doesn't keep going. I've been saying for years that Rome doesn't fall in a day. I didn't say that Rome isn't falling. These things can take a very long time. And like in 2007, the housing crisis, that was a coalition of events that you could see as early as 2003. I saw it in 2005, and people were saying nothing ever changes to me. In fact, there were scholars and theorists like Baudrillard who saying that the problems of market fluctuations were fixed. And guess what I hear now? The problems of market fluctuations are fixed. Off of a decade and a half, motherfucker, cycles are in 7 years. That's 2 short cycles. The idea that you fix that, and I hear serious economists say this shit in 2 short cycles, is because 24-hour media has broken a lot of your brains. And you don't understand that stats can be misleading if you're only looking at them in a short period of time. Let me give you a period about the dollar. I've been hearing people predict the imminent collapse of the dollar forever, and I've always laughed at it. But I will tell you, the dollar has been declining in purchasing power since 2000, and it's about 40%. It's just not had the big, oh my God, 1920s Germany crash that people will predict. It doesn't happen that fast. Similarly, the 2007 recession was still affecting things well into COVID on access to materials because planting trees is a long cycle. The change in the housing market changed construction patterns, which have only been fixed, and that was fixed by changing a lot of materials things are made out of, which changed supply chains, which is still taking a while to adjust. The cause of tariffs has actually increased the trade deficit because people will also not buy your stuff when you're punishing them. And the people you can easily hit with tariffs are also the people who consume most of your goods. Tariffing people who don't consume a lot from you and only use you as an export economy does hurt them. But the most likely people you're going to have the most effect on are trading partners, not exporters of raw materials, because you still need those. So nothing's happening just means that the valuation of a speculative economy based on about 7 stocks, most of which tied to the AI, which has not generated a ton of profitability to the companies downstream of them, only profitability to the companies themselves, which means eventually they will not have just like private consumers, but also corporate consumers if that profitability doesn't come up. And the profitability to that has come with layoffs. That still isn't leading to enough productivity to offset the cost in a lot of cases. I'm not saying AI is. I'm not one of these AI doomers thinks it's going to go away and collapse. A lot of people say that. I don't think that, but I also don't think the Magnificent Seven holding up the entire U.S. stock market is possible forever. But a lot of people, when they say nothing happens, seem to think that kicking the can down the road is infinite. And like, oh, we live in it by tomorrow. I used to say this about other policies, and they're like, oh, we live in it by decades. No, you don't. Stuff that happened to the soil in the 1930s is definitely affecting you now. Everything is happening all the time. All right. When people talk about the erosions in the unitary executive, what they see from Trump, and I hear a lot of these, freedom, law, and justice liberals miss the fact that they contributed to that. That doesn't mean they did the same thing. It doesn't mean that it's all the same thing, because there is a time when something's gradual changes become something else. But those gradual changes were there. I mean, if we want to talk about what Trump's doing now, you got to go back to FDR and maybe even Wilson. All right. If you want to talk about the problems of the administrative state, you have to go back probably to the end of the Civil War. If you want to talk about the over-reliance on the courts and how the conservative courts have dismantled all this liberal stuff, you have to talk about liberals empowering the courts as their main mechanism of getting progressive social reforms through the legal system for literally a half a century. Stuff is happening. Just because you're so addled that you only see things immediately doesn't mean it's not. And just because things don't fall today or tomorrow, and that every stock clash doesn't lead to an immediate devaluation of the economy, also doesn't mean the economy is strong. In many ways, we get gaslit by everybody. People telling you the Biden administration that the economy was really good. It kind of wasn't. People telling you now, you've seen all this panic that the Trump economy is going to collapse tomorrow. Man, a lot of the bombs planted in the big, beautiful bill and the Trump economy are going to blow up in 10 years. The stuff that happened in the 80s is a large part of the reason the stuff that happened in the 2000s with subprime mortgages and loans happened. And even that comes back all the way down. There's all kinds of perverse incentives, like trying to stabilize interest rates. The people who already held them so prices were fairly stable have led to this situation of roulette and speculation on property prices that really shuts younger people out, but also makes it impossible for older people to even understand the cost difference because they're not paying it. Stuff is changing. Hypocrisy is always there. The contradictions aren't about your personal choices. And all these things stop you from thinking about how things are going to change in the long term. You want to talk about a strategy of patience, also have long analysis. Oh, generational shifts. Look at what incentivizes those generational shifts. What incentivizes those generational shifts is things that happens over a long period of time. Zoomers didn't become Zoomers just because of COVID, although that's a large part of it. Millennials aren't just a result of the 2007 recession. That's a large part of it. Boomers, which are in some ways the only real coherent generation, didn't become the real coherent generation just because of things that happened in the 1950s 50s and 60s. It was in response to things that happened as early as the 1910s. Even the responses that conservatives have over things like Cracker Barrel, and I'm going to do a video over this, is based on longue durée trends that there can only manifest at and yell about and stupid culture war issues when it's directed towards that. But the stripping away of the character of everything is part of what's bothering them. But why is that happening? That's a longue durée trend. It's not just about recent trends in DEI. It's about how a generic market doesn't offend anybody, doesn't make anyone feel welcome, and it makes you just engage with it fast enough to take your money and get out, so there's less cost. Think through the long term, not the short term, and stop thinking about everything your enemies are doing wrong, and also the contradictions on what you do. Because those two thought terminating phrases don't help you. It might get you a bunch of clicks on the internet, but it's not going to change anything. Like and subscribe, hit the bell. You can find the free podcast on anything podcasts are served. That's going to have the interviews. There's paid podcasts where you can get audio of stuff like this on the Patreon wall. I'm better. I'm healing. I'm hiding my scar, but I'm healing up. My voice is sometimes normal, and then other days I don't have a lot of it. So we'll see how that goes. You're going to hear that I'm straining mine today. But I'd like to thank my new high-level patrons. A lot of you have been very generous and helpful in the last couple weeks. So I'd like to give out the benefits for that. I'd like to thank my Kana and Kahana, my $10 patrons, all of them, and all my patrons really. But my new ones, here's your shout out. Buddy R and Daniel P, thank you. And you are both also high enough level that you will be put in the free show notes for the show. All right. Take care. Protect your peace.